We know that some LLMs run on Duke servers and others run outside of Duke. So, for example, if we consider the Llama model by Meta, where does this model run? On a Duke server or a server outside of Duke? Well, it turns out that Meta made models that are open source. Open source means that we can download the source code from the internet for this model. Because we can download this model and its source code, it means we can install it on any computer, and this is called an open source model. This model then means that Duke can install it on its computers. So Meta made an open source model that runs on Duke servers. Now, let's consider OpenAI. OpenAI has several models. Where do these run? Well, these are closed source models. They are serving these to us via a commercial API, and when we access this, we pay OpenAI for the service. Now, if OpenAI allowed us to download these models, we would then install them on Duke servers, and we would never have to pay OpenAI. So it turns out that these closed source or commercial models are going to run on servers outside of Duke. So what does this mean altogether? Well, when we consider several different models, one of the first distinctions is open source models versus commercial or closed source large language models. Now, if we look at this list, for example, we can see that Meta and one of the Mistral models, it's called Mistral On-Site, allows us to install these on Duke servers, whereas a commercial company like OpenAI is going to allow us to access their servers via an API. So open source versus closed source is one of the first distinctions between these different models. Now, why is this important? Well, open source LLMs enable all data to stay on Duke's network. So we can think of it as we have a user at their computer putting in some data, a prompt, a query, that then goes into a server that is on Duke's premises. Ultimately, this means that when you use an open source model that is installed on Duke's servers, your data and privacy are subject to Duke policies. However, when you use a closed or commercial large language model, your data and privacy are subject to company policies. Now, this could become important if you are thinking about a use case where you might need an open source or Duke installed model. So for example, if you have some sensitive information, if you have a collaborator's information that you don't have permission to send to an external server, if you have protected health information or perhaps some student information, these might require use of an open source or Duke installed model. Now, I have to read to you in my best disclosure voice. This does not imply that you should be putting this information to an LLM, simply that as you think about your needs, open source versus closed source might be an important consideration. Now, let's get back to your data and your privacy subject to Duke's policies versus other policies. If we think about OpenAI for a second, OpenAI has policies on its data use. If you go to the settings panel within ChatGPT, you can find controls for your data. That little toggle at the top where you can improve this model for everyone is your decision about whether or not you take your data that you put into the LLM and send it to OpenAI to train their models on. Now, there are a couple of caveats here. If you are on the free, non-paid version of ChatGPT, you do not have this option. You are automatically opted into and required to share your data with OpenAI. Now, it's often said that if you do not pay for the product, you are the product. In this case, that is absolutely true. Now, on the other end, if you access OpenAI through one of Duke's login and Duke's relationships with OpenAI, this will be toggled off and permanently toggled off. Duke licenses OpenAI through a product called ChatGPT Edu. ChatGPT Edu has a restriction where none of the data that is accessed through ChatGPT is going to be sent to OpenAI for training. Now, this is all within OpenAI's policies, and if you want to look, you can click on this information on OpenAI's site, and you can look and see how your data are used to improve model performance. So it's important for end users to be informed about how their data are being used. So I told you, and this is an important point, ChatGPT Edu automatically disables training. So you'll have some different features here if you access ChatGPT through an educational license. An important point here when we're talking about data and data retention and privacy is that data retention is different than memory. So also within the chatgpt.com settings, what you'll be able to see are some settings for memory. Now, memory is a software engineer's approach to try to enable a better user experience. So if I go to ChatGPT and I ask something about it one day, and then I want to go back the next day, I might, as an end user, have an expectation that ChatGPT remembers that thing. So let's say I'm planning a vacation to Paris, France in the spring. I hear it's lovely in the spring. And I have a conversation, it's a chat about this, and it's suggesting some hotels and suggesting some sites and attractions to see. Now, if I go back the next day and I say, let's continue our planning, but this is going to be in a new chat, then that new chat instance will not have any memory of the previous chat instance because it does not have that as context. So what OpenAI engineers have started to do is build in what they call memory to enhance this user experience. So memory is different than data retention. Memory is simply summaries of previous conversations stored in a database. So if you look at saved memories here, you can see some one line or sometimes 2-line snippets of information that ChatGPT has about me. Now, one thing I notice here is that it has 9-year-old daughter loves Minecraft. I do have a 9-year-old daughter. She does love Minecraft. And we were chatting with ChatGPT one day, trying to find games that were similar to Minecraft that she also might like. At the end of that conversation, ChatGPT wrote a single line that says 9-year-old daughter loves Minecraft as a memory. So if I then go back and start talking about video games, ChatGPT might bring up, oh, here's a game similar to Minecraft. I know your daughter loves it. Now, if this is creepy to you also, then you can go ahead and delete selective memories from this database. And again, this is very different than data retention. This is a retention of a summary of a conversation that is engineered in order to enhance the user experience. So also ChatGPT has the ability to forget memories or simply to delete them from the database. The relationship between Duke and OpenAI means that we can access OpenAI through Duke licenses. This means something very important that's worth taking a moment to mention. When you log in to ChatGPT via Shibboleth using your NetID, something very important happens. Your data and privacy are no longer subject to OpenAI's policies. Your data and privacy are subject to policies negotiated by Duke. So this is a really important distinction when we're thinking about open source versus closed source. Data that is staying completely on premises and subject to Duke's policies versus data that is leaving Duke premises and subject to other companies' policies, or importantly, other companies' policies that have been negotiated and is ultimately blessed by Duke. So when we think about our models, the first thing we need to think about is whether this is an open source model or whether this is a commercial model. So when we look at this list now, if we look at that provider, we can see that we have several open source providers, and we also have the commercial or closed source provider. So that's the first key in this series of videos, is open source ensures privacy.